Hi there, and welcome to this special edition of Under the Microscope. I'm your host, Pranoti Ksirsagar, and today we are trying something new and exciting. In these AI-generated episodes, we offer you a quick dive into the fascinating research discussed on our show. Thanks to Google's NotebookLM, the experiment version, the AI crafts both the script and the voice you will be hearing. While this summary gives you a taste of our full episode, I would highly encourage you to check out the full conversation between myself and the guest, where we dive deep into the science and the stories behind the research. Find the link in the description and enjoy the best of both worlds, the AI efficiency and human connection.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got some really cool research to go through today that you sent us, all about quantum dots.
Yeah.
Specifically, something called site-controlled quantum dots.
It's a fascinating area.
Yeah.
And your sources really highlight how we can actually precisely position these quantum dots, which is really...
That's wild. But how are they typically made? I'm picturing like scientists with tweezers just like putting them down one by one.
If only it were that easy.
Right.
The standard approach is a bit more like, imagine you're sprinkling seeds on a field.
Okay.
You create the right conditions on a surface, and the quantum dots sort of spontaneously nucleate or form.
So they just kind of appear randomly.
Exactly. And that's the problem with the traditional methods. It's hard to actually integrate them into like more complex devices when you don't know where they'll appear.
Right. It's like a circuit board where the pieces are just moving around.
Exactly. Like trying to wire something up when the components are moving.
That's impossible. Okay. So that's where site-controlled quantum dots come in.
Precisely. Researchers like Emanuele Pelucchi, his work you sent, are pioneering techniques to place these quantum dots exactly where we want them.
Okay, and his research was all about using these tiny etched pyramids on a special wafer.
Yeah.
Can you explain how that works?
So they start with a gallium arsenide wafer, which is a pretty common material for semiconductors.
Okay.
And they use a technique called lithography to basically etch millions of tiny inverted pyramids onto this surface.
So they're creating a template.
Yeah, think of it like a mold for the dots to form in.
Okay.
And then they use a process called epitaxy to deposit more semiconductor material onto this pre-patterned wafer.
Okay, I've heard of epitaxy, but could you explain that a little more simply?
Imagine you're carefully stacking Lego bricks, layer by layer, ensuring each one aligns perfectly. Epitaxy is kind of similar, but at the atomic level.
Wow.
It involves depositing atoms onto this substrate so that it maintains the crystal structure.
So like atomic Lego building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because the way crystals grow, the atoms sort of want to fill those tiny pyramid-shaped indentations. And that creates the perfect little spot for a quantum dot to form, right at the tip of each pyramid.
So the pyramids are guiding the growth of the quantum dots.
Precisely. And because we know exactly where those pyramids are, we know where each dot will form.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a game changer for actually building devices.
So can scientists just create like an unlimited number of quantum dots now, like all in the right spot?
Not quite. While Pelucchi's group has shown they can make millions of these site-controlled quantum dots, they have hit a bit of a challenge.
What's that?
Only about 10% of the quantum dots they create are what they would consider high quality. The rest have like variations in their size or shape or other property.
So there's still some randomness.
A little bit, yeah.
Even with this precise control.
And that's what makes his work even more interesting.
Okay.
He's trying to understand why that variation occurs and how to get it to 100%. And that's what makes his research so revolutionary. It's like a whole new way of thinking about how to control these tiny things.
This is incredible. I'm already so into this.
It's pretty amazing it wasn't just some lucky accident.
Yeah, you mentioned he went super deep, like looking at what's happening at the atomic level.
Right. Like imagine being able to actually watch those atoms as they're deposited onto the surface.
Wow.
And see how they interact.
That's some serious detective work.
Oh, yeah. And what he found was that even the tiniest imperfections on the surface, and we're talking atomic level, can have these ripple effects on the whole process.
So like one misplaced atom can mess up the entire quantum dot?
Yeah, it's kind of like a domino effect. And different imperfections cause different problems. Some might make the dot too big. Others might mess with its shape or what it's made of.
So it's like if you're building a house of cards, one wrong move and the whole thing collapses.
And this is where his work gets really practical.
Okay.
He realized if you could control those tiny imperfections, you could actually fine-tune the properties of the quantum dots.
So it's not just about putting them in the right place, but making sure they grow perfectly, too.
Exactly. Think of it like a gardener carefully preparing the soil before planting seeds,
Right.
The right conditions mean healthier plants.
So how do you prepare the soil at the atomic level?
That's the really clever part. Pelucci and his team, they've been experimenting with different techniques. One way is to use special chemical treatments to passivate the surface.
Passivate.
Basically, it means making the surface less reactive. It's like putting a protective layer that stops unwanted interactions.
Oh, so like a layer of mulch to stop weeds?
Exactly. They've also been using something called atomic layer deposition, which is a way to build up materials one atom at a time to create the perfect surface.
So they're basically creating like a custom-made foundation for each dot.
That's a great way to put it. And what's exciting is that this isn't just theory. It's actually being used to improve real quantum devices.
Okay, now we're talking. Like what? Give me some examples.
Sure. So in quantum computing, one of the biggest challenges is making qubits, the quantum bits that are stable.
Because they're very fragile.
Yeah, exactly. And any imperfections in the dots that make up those qubits can lead to decoherence, which means they lose that quantum information.
Oh, I see.
So Pelucci's work is helping to build better, more resilient qubits.
So they can hold on to their quantum state for longer.
Exactly, which is a huge step towards actually making quantum computers work.
That's amazing. What about other applications?
Well, in quantum communication, they're using quantum dots to create single photons.
Individual particles of light.
Yeah, and those photons can carry information in a way that's super secure.
So it's like secret messages encoded in light.
That's the idea. And the quality of those photons, which comes down to the quality of the quantum dots, is what makes it secure and reliable.
So this surface control thing is affecting like all areas of quantum technology.
Totally. It's a great example of how really basic research, like looking at tiny details, can have a huge impact on real-world stuff.
I'm starting to see why you call this a paradigm shift. He's not just improving things, he's changing how we think about it all.
Exactly. And it's not just the tech stuff, it's also how he thinks about making science more accessible.
Oh yeah, we haven't really talked about that yet, his whole idea of making quantum mechanics easier to understand.
Right. He really believes that scientists have to explain their work in a way everyone can get.
Yeah, because right now most people just think of quantum from like sci-fi movie.
Or those crazy product ads.
Yeah.
Which leads to a lot of confusion. He thinks we need to get past all that hype and really explain the real science behind it.
So it's not dumbing it down, it's making it relatable.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He wants to show that it's not magic, it's just a different set of rules that govern the universe.
At the tiniest level.
At the tiniest level, yeah.
I think this deep dive is doing a pretty good job of that. We've looked at how to make these site-controlled quantum dots.
Right.
How important the surface is and what we can use them for, like in computing and communication.
It's a field that's changing so fast, it's amazing.
Yeah. And we've seen how much the human element matters, the passion, working together, sharing what we know.
And Emanuele Pelucci's journey as a scientist is like a perfect example of that.
So in the next part, we'll get into his personal story.
Yeah.
What drives him and how he pushes the limits of this tech. So we've been talking about Emanuele Pelucci, this incredible work with site-controlled quantum dots.
Yeah.
And how he really wants people to understand quantum mechanics better.
It's pretty cool to see a scientist who's not just focused on the research itself, but also how it affects everyone.
So what's he like, this Pelucci guy? What kind of person gets into this kind of work?
Well, from everything I've read, he just seems so curious about everything.
Okay.
He doesn't just want to know what things are. He wants to know why they work the way they do.
So it's not enough to just build the quantum dots. He's got to figure out all the little atomic details, too.
Exactly. And that curiosity goes way beyond the lab, too. He seems fascinated by everything. Different cultures, different ways of thinking, everything.
Yeah, I notice he's moved around a lot. Italy, Switzerland, Ireland.
Right.
Seems like he likes new experiences.
Yeah, he really embraces new ideas, and that's probably one of the reasons he's done so well in quantum research, which is all about working together.
You mentioned earlier that he's a big believer in collaboration.
Yeah.
Why is that so important to him?
Well, for one thing, science is rarely a one-person show, you know?
Yeah.
Really tough problems need lots of different perspectives.
It's like they say two heads are better than one.
Exactly. But for Pelucci, it's even more than that. He thinks collaboration is how science moves forward.
How so?
Well, he believes that when scientists share their knowledge and work together, they can make discoveries way faster than if they were all working alone.
So it's like All the boats rise with the tide.
Perfect analogy. And he really builds that into his own research group. Lots of open communication, everyone sharing ideas.
Sounds like a good environment.
It is. It's not like that old image of the lone genius working in their basement,
Yeah, more like a team of people who love what they do.
Exactly. That's what makes science so cool, is everyone working together to figure out the universe.
Speaking of figuring things out, what about his idea of making quantum mechanics easier to understand?
Right.
Why does he care so much about that?
Well, as we've seen, this quantum technology has the potential to change so much about our lives. But it can only really happen if people understand the science behind it.
Yeah, right now most people only hear quantum and think of weird products or sci-fi stuff.
Exactly. And that creates a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
Pelucchi thinks scientists need to explain things better in a way anyone can understand.
So it's not about making it simple, it's about making it interesting.
Exactly. He wants to show that it's not magic, it's a set of rules, just like anything else.
Okay.
It's how the universe works at the smallest level.
And I think this deep dive has done a pretty good job of explaining all that. We've learned about making these site-controlled quantum dots, how important the surface is,
Super important.
and all the things we can do with them, like quantum computers and communication.
It's crazy how fast this field is moving. It's incredible.
Yeah, and we've also seen how much the human side of things matters, the passion, the teamwork, sharing what we know.
People like Emanuele Pelucchi really embody that.
Absolutely. So, listener, if you're feeling curious about quantum mechanics now, go explore. There's a ton of information out there online, in libraries, just waiting to be discovered.
And who knows, maybe someday you'll be the one making those groundbreaking discoveries.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
I hope you enjoyed this AI-crafted glimpse into the world of Under the Microscope. To dive deeper into the full conversation, click on the link in the description and join me and my guest for an insightful journey through science. And while you're at it, don't forget to follow Under the Microscope podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're feeling extra generous, leaving us a review would mean the world to us. It helps us bring the science to an even broader audience. Best of all, it's absolutely free for you. Thank you for listening and see you in the next one.